It was late summer in the year of 1928, and a physician, stressed, badly in need of a vacation, desperate just to get out of the office, made a mistake. It was a big mistake, actually. It was the kind of mistake that usually ruins months or years of research. But in this case, the mistake led to one of the greatest scientific advancements in the 20th century. The doctor, you see, was preparing a series of petri dishes in which he was growing samples of an infectious bacteria, and he then left those samples in the lab unattended and said, "I'm going on summer break." And when he came back to the lab at St. Mary's Hospital in London later that year, the doctor discovered he had accidentally left one of the covers off one of these petri dishes. This dish was now contaminated with a blue-green mold that ruined the sample. Except, there was something very funny about this mold, something he had never observed before. Around the mold, in this petri dish, there was a halo of space where the dangerous bacteria seemed to be unable to grow. This foreign, unknown mold had stopped the bacteria in its tracks. This physician, Dr. Alexander Fleming, immediately knew that he had quite by accident discovered something special, a mold with an antibacterial component. Fleming would call the extract of this mold penicillin, and it would go on to be one of the greatest medical breakthroughs in the history of the world, saving countless millions of lives around the globe. But you know what's even more surprising? Very few people realized just how important Fleming's discovery actually was. When he went to medical conferences in the following years, other doctors initially dismissed his work. Some of Fleming's students and colleagues started their own medical trials, but the initial results were only partially successful because the quality and purity of the penicillin was very low. In the late 1930s, the wartime, cash-strapped British government wasn't interested in investing in this improbable discovery, and many of the early clinical trials failed to garner any attention. It wasn't until 1942 that Fleming received the attention he deserved when a man named Harry Lambert, who was diagnosed with a fatal infection of the nervous system, begged Fleming to try the discovery on him. Test it on me. And Fleming injected Lambert with the penicillin, and within a week, the once fatally ill man was completely healed. It was a scientific miracle. Still, the mass production was difficult. Fleming's colleagues actually went to the United States to try and find help producing the antibiotic, and they didn't know how to carry this mold over with them or how to be able to get it through customs or deal with the problems of traveling with it. And so the doctors actually smeared the inside of their pockets with this penicillin mold to take it on the airplane. They went around looking for somebody to help them grow this stuff in better quantity and stronger ways, and they eventually found their way to Peoria, Illinois, to an outpost of the Department of Agriculture, where there were some expertise in culturing molds. And here they tried to go through every mold sample they could find to find a really good one that they could grow good penicillin from. They evaluated molds they found in China and in India and South Africa. Sounds like interesting research, right? But they couldn't find anything good enough. They couldn't find anything strong enough until a woman who was working as part of the research team went to the fruit market in Peoria, Illinois, this is a true story, and found a really moldy cantaloupe. I'm not making this up. And she brought this moldy cantaloupe back, and as it happened, this wonderful mold-encrusted cantaloupe was a penicillin jackpot. They'd never seen anything this strong. And they were able to cultivate it and grow the antibiotic in earnest. And the rest, they say, is history. Alexander Fleming won the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 1945, a full 17 years after that groundbreaking discovery that late summer when he left the cover off the Petri dish. Penicillin would go on to save millions of lives since the 1940s, and most scientists and historians believe it was one of the single greatest breakthroughs in the history of science. But it took 17 years for the discovery to be recognized for the groundbreaking work that it truly was. All it took was an accidentally spoiled Petri dish, researchers who cared enough to smear mold inside their suit coats, and a really funky cantaloupe from Peoria. Truth really is stranger than fiction, right? But you know, what really fascinates me about this story is that while the discovery was a happy accident, the implementation was anything but. While Fleming may have made the discovery because the right mold literally blew in from a window into the lab, turning that discovery into life-saving medicine took a long time, and it was hard to do. And he had to fight to do it, as did many of his colleagues. You know, sometimes it's true. It's like we have the solution in our hands. We have the knowledge of what we need to do, but we don't know how to implement it. It's the doing that's the hard part. We know about something that is transformative, groundbreaking, earth-shattering, life-changing. But actually getting that off the ground, that's where the challenge lies. Or to put this question another way, how do we go from knowing the truth to acting on it? How do we go from identifying a solution to putting that solution into practice? How do we go from goal to reality? Because most of the time, we know how to do what we want, really, if you think about it, how to live how we want, how to achieve what we want. We just don't know how to get those first steps going. How do we get from A to B? Let me give you a really simple example. Every single person out there, myself included, knows how to lose weight if you really want to. All right? It's very easy, folks. I got to tell you. It's very simple. Here's the secret. You consume fewer calories than you burn. That's the secret. It's arithmetic. Losing weight actually is an elementary school math problem. But that doesn't stop us from buying tens of millions of diet books every year, does it? It doesn't stop me from gaining weight and eating pizza late at night either. It just doesn't. Knowing the truth and doing it are different things. The knowledge is simple. The practice and the discipline to act on that knowledge, that's where things get really hard and really messy. Jesus says a bunch of remarkable things in the gospel today. He says, when the Spirit of truth comes, he will guide you into all truth. And Jesus says this in the same gospel where he tells us, you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. So the thing is, I firmly believe that we as Christian people, as baptized people, we have the knowledge of the truth. We know who God is calling us to be. We know the difference between right and wrong. We know what a good, just society looks like, even. In fact, you don't even have to be a Christian, of course, to know that. Everybody has that conscience, has that knowledge of right and wrong. Every single time I do something stupid or I treat someone else poorly, I feel guilty about it. I feel like I've done something wrong, and that's what we call a conscience. What is that really but the work of the Holy Spirit leading us into truth, telling us when we've done something that we shouldn't have, reminding us we really should be better. But just before that, Jesus says something that's even more striking to me. He tells his disciples, I still have many things to say to you, but you can't bear them now. And I think that's one of, if not the single most important statement that Jesus makes. The implication of that is profound. He means to tell them that while he's really tried his best to teach them, there will be more truth. There will be more revelation to come. In the future, Jesus says, the Spirit will reveal much more to them, new truths forged in the crucible of new revelation and new experience. God's work of teaching us isn't done. It wasn't done with Jesus' own life. In fact, it's going on today. And scientific discovery, by the way, I believe is part of that. Revelation to us. If God gives us reason, those tools are also how we learn about truth in the world. So the question is not always, do we know the truth? The question is, how do we live that? I think you can agree that this is where things get difficult. This is where the rubber meets the road. Let's go back to that remarkable story about Alexander Fleming for a moment, because there are a couple things about his life that I think can actually help us with that spiritual question. The first was that Fleming was a person of incredible, remarkable, extraordinary even, discipline and work ethic. Even after his colleagues didn't see the value of the discovery, and even after the government refused to help or fund his continued research, and even after the first trials of antibiotics didn't go well, Fleming didn't give up. He had what we call today grit, or as Paul put it in the letter to the Romans today, endurance. Endurance that gives us hope at the end. Fleming didn't give up. He had persistence and determination. He knew the truth of what he had on his hands, and he was absolutely convicted by it. And he spent 17 years continuing to work on that discovery with very little in the way of accolades or recognition, or with very few people taking notice. I think you'll find that this is a common trait among really successful people. They have tenacity, endurance. You can achieve almost anything that you put your mind to, but sometimes it hurts, it burns, it causes pain. It takes years of hard work. Anything worth doing is going to take a toll along the way. It's not always fun, but it's a commitment of time and energy and practice. Secondly, and this is also really important, Fleming didn't do this project alone. He wasn't some kind of lone wolf genius. We often tend to think of people like that way who make major discoveries, but that wasn't the truth at all. He was part of a team of students, of colleagues, of other researchers, people who had different areas of expertise who he brought in to help him on the project. For example, Fleming was not a chemist. He didn't know much about chemistry at all, actually, and so he recruited a chemist named Ernst Chain to assist him with the research. And then they in turn recruited other people to fill in their weak spots. One historian of science would later say that without Fleming, no Chain, without Chain, no Florey, without Florey, no Heatley, without Heatley, there would be no penicillin. It wasn't the work of one person. It was a team of people who collaborated with one another, who lifted each other up, who filled in the blanks for each other, who shared expertise. You know, the key to a growing Christian life of faith, and to, frankly, anything else that matters, is that it takes persistence and discipline and dedication. It takes an openness to change and new movements of the Spirit, to new revelation, and it also takes help. The first of those might be a product of the will, but the latter two are products of community. That's why churches exist, by the way, to help one another, to encourage one another, to listen to the movement of the Spirit together, to build one another up. On a day like this Trinity Sunday here in the wake of Pentecost, I think it's worth remembering that our Christian lives take similar kinds of efforts. The disciples were given the gift of the Holy Spirit just like we are, just like everyone in this room has. But each and every one of them had to take that gift and then put it into practice in the real world. They had to make that gift a reality in their own lives. It took grit. It took spiritual work of prayer and service. It took an openness to new revelations, to see things in a new light, to new values being written on new tablets. And it took active participation in a community that strengthened them. We know the truth. We do. But making that truth real here in this messy world, that's a matter of practice. To make it a matter of reality in a way that all people can see, that's where the real hard work begins. The whole of creation is groaning in labor pains, Paul would say, to give birth to something truly remarkable. For me as a Christian, that means the healing of the world, the reconciliation of all people to God through love. All of us can be a part of that work of creation if we want to be, if we roll up our sleeves and do something about it. Holy Lord, today we ask you to give your people a spirit of determination, of persistence, and of openness to the movement of the Spirit in healing this broken and hurting world. In the name of your Son, Jesus Christ.